أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال علي بن الحسين عليهما الصلاة والسلام فأما حق الله الأكبر فأنك تعبده لا تشرك به شيئا فإذا فعلت ذلك بإخلاص جعل لك على نفسه أن يكفيك أمر الدنيا والآخرة ويحفظ لك ما تحب منها. صلوات भेजिए محمد وعلى محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We've been discussing Risalat Al-Huquq and the commentary of Risalat Al-Huquq by fourth Imam, Imam Zayn Al-Abidin alayhi salatu wassalam. Continuing, last week we talked about the concept of gratitude and showing thankfulness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was also part of worship. As our Imam mentions that among the huquq and the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon you is that you may worship Him. And continuing with the different concepts or different methods of worshiping, last week we were discussing the concept of gratitude and showing thankfulness. And that itself was mentioned to be an ibadat as well. So when you thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that itself is considered to be ibadat. And that's where we left off. Today, among the forms of worship that Ma'asumeen have mentioned is earning a living from the halal method is also considered to be worship. We talked about it, how the concept of worship is not limited to 5-time prayers, fasting, and so on and so forth. Rather, it expands and it is in every aspect of our life. So when you go to work, when you earn halal, that is considered to be ibadat as well. So we see that it says in chapter number 62, verse number 10, that فَإِذَا قُضِيَتِ الصَّلَاةُ فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Surah Jumu'ah, verse number 10. It says, and when the prayer is finished, then may you disperse through the land and seek of the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and celebrate the praises of God often without stint that you may prosper. So we see over here, Allah, after having performed the ibadat, which is in the form of this salat, it says, now you may disperse among the land and go ahead and earn and get your share. And that is also being counted as part of ibadat. This verse implies that we can go to work even after the congregational Friday prayers. Even the Prophet went to the bazaar and to the marketplaces after the prayers. Our fifth Imam quoted on the authority of Rasulullah, he says, Al-ibadatu sab'una juz'an, afdaluha talabul halal. Very beautiful Imam mentioned, he says that there are 70 parts in worshipping. 70 parts in worshipping, the most excellent of which is seeking to earn halal in the legitimate, or seeking to earn the legitimate income. 70 parts of ibadat. One and the most afdal and the most virtuous of all is earning halal. This is what our fifth Imam is saying over here. We see at another hadith from our fifth Imam, he says, Man talaba ad-dunya isti'fafan 'anil nas wa sa'yan 'ala ahlihi wa ta'attufan 'ala jarihi laqiya Allahu azza wa jal. It says, whoever strives hard in order to earn a living for his family, to be independent of others, and to help his neighbors and save the honor or save his own honor, will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter with his face shining like a full moon. This is again among the virtues of earning halal. So this was one method of performing ibadah. So when you earn, as has been mentioned, that those who are among the abrar, the most righteous ones, they do not spare any moment of their life which is not considered to be ibadat. So even when they speak, it is ibadat. Even when they look, it is ibadat. Even when they're earning, it is considered to be ibadat. 24 hours, whatever it is that they do, is considered to be ibadat. You say, how is that possible? During the month of Ramadan, we kept mentioning this hadith that when you nawmukum fiha ibadah wa anfasukum fihi tasbih. When you breathe, it is considered to be tasbih. When you sleep, it is considered to be ibadah. So you can do something, whereas all of your actions would be considered ibadah. We see passing away while working is also considered to be ibadah. There's a lengthy hadith in this regard. It says, on the authority of our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, that it was mentioned that the person who saw our fifth Imam working on a hot day, and Imam was with his slaves and he was working hot, this person who saw this, he said, I thought to myself, why was one of the most noble men of Quraysh, that is the fifth Imam, working so hard on such a hot day, seeking the benefits of this world? So there are ways of looking at things from different angles. One person might look how difficult or how much struggle that Imam is doing to earn halal. Another person is looking at from the point of view, look at this person, how greedy he is, that in the hottest of the days in Arabia, he's sweating and he's working towards the worldly benefit. Two angles of looking at the same exact thing. This is where he said this he comes over to Imam, and he said, I thought I should advise Imam. He said, I went to him and greeted him. Imam was sweating. I asked him, how come you who are one of the most noble men of Quraysh are working so hard, seeking the benefits of this world on such a hot day? Why don't you pick another day to do this? What would happen if your death approaches now? How will you answer Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Imam replied by saying, if the angel of death comes now, while I'm obeying God and working to earn a living for my family, to be needless of others and to not be relying on others, I have no fear. I should be worried if I was committing a sin when angels come upon me or the angel of death arrives to take my life. This is where this person whose name was Munqadir, he says, O grandson of the Prophet, I wanted to advise you, but you have advised me. This is where Imam ﷺ mentions, he says, considers working to earn a living to be form of worship. It is a form of worship that Imam is saying, while I'm working on this hot day, just so that I can provide for my family, and as well as, not just provide for my family, to be sufficient or to not ask anyone for help. This itself is to be considered an ibadah. Salawat biji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And many ahadith in this regard emphasize on the fact that whoever seeks a legitimate income for himself and for his family is like a soldier who's engaging in a holy war. So to that extent that it is lifted up to the concept of jihad, which has been mentioned in Quran many places. Seek your sustenance from God by hard work. So obviously this is something which we need not to go ahead and emphasize so much, because we already know the emphasis that Quran lays down and Masumin have put upon as far as working is concerned. It says hard-working worshippers are superior to those who are idle. There are people, different types of people. Some people work hard, some people don't work hard. Imam is giving a comparison. He says the hard-working worshippers are superior to those who are idle. Again, from our sixth Imam, it says, Rijalun. This is actually ayat of Surah Nur. Then we'll quote the hadith from Imam. It says, Rijalun la tulhihim tijaratun wala bay'un an dhikrillah wa iqamis salat wa ita'iz zakat yakhafuna yawman tataqallabu fihi al-qulub wal absar. This is Surah Nur, chapter 24, verse 37. By men who neither traffic nor merchandise can divert their attentions from remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nor from regular prayer, nor from the practice of regular charity. Their only fear is of the day of judgment, and when their hearts and eyes will be transformed in a world wholly new. This is where it is mentioning how these people, even though they might be working and occupied into the worldly affairs, still it does not lead them away from mention or remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then itself it becomes a form of ibadat as well. This is where Imam said, Kanu ashab tijaratin fa idha hadrat as-salat tarakut tijara. This verse is about people who did business but stopped their business whenever the time for prayer came about. So they were keeping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their mind. They were remembering God's mercy. They were remembering their performance of ibadat, as soon as they would hear the call of namaz, they would leave their businesses and they would go towards that. There are many such traditions regarding the worth of and the reward of working. We will just stay content with the amount that we have mentioned over here. One last hadith in this regard says, Man wajada ma'an wa turaban thumma iftaqara fa'abadahu Allah. He said, if one has land and water, but he's still poor, God will deprive him of his mercy. We see this sometimes as well. We see why some people are constantly in deprivation. And there's an event about a person as well whose sustenance was very limited. The king looked at him, king of the time, looked at him and wanted to help him. So he sent some food for him that day, and underneath the food he hid some golden coins so that he could help out this person. When this person received this food, he said to himself that I don't really need all of this food. He gave it away to a person who was a traveler. Next day, the king was thinking, I had sent him so much. He must have changed, or his life must have transformed now. He must have utilized the favors that I had bestowed upon him through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He goes to him and sees him is still getting his sustenance from the same hole, from the same place. He said, when even Allah does not want this person to flourish, or this person does not get up and run about doing what is being offered to him, then his state should be this much. Allah does not want him to exceed from this amount. And so these are the people, if they have land and water but are still poor, God will deprive him of his mercy. People were talking to the Prophet about a man who was known for his abstinence, his asceticism, his piety, constant fasting and praying. They told the Prophet, O Prophet of God, we have never found anyone more pious than this individual. The Prophet asked him, how does he earn a living? They replied by saying, we run his life. Then the Prophet said, then you are more pious than this person. If he's not doing anything and just doing the ibadat and the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not earning anything, not earning a living, and not worrying about his own earnings, and you are taking care of him, then Prophet says, you are more pious than this person. Although you might not be doing all the things in the extraordinary way that this person is performing. So we understand from this last hadith, how important it is, and it is indeed considered to be a worship, a form of worship, when you earn a legitimate earning. Salawat biji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We see that one of the forms of ibadat is also supplication, dua, where in many traditions it says, ad-du'a'u huwa al-ibadah. I skipped through some of the things, inshallah, when we have time, we will talk about them at another time. I get to the traditions on supplication. It says supplication is a form of a worship, is a form of ibadah. And this is where another tradition is mentioned, which says if two people enter a mosque, and one says more prayers and the other one says more supplications. Today, you saw when we came, we performed the ibadat and we also recited the dua. So there was a balance in what we did. We did not just focus entirely onto the ibadat and the salat. We performed the salat, which is obligatory upon us. And then we went on to recite the du'as, which is also something which is recommended. So this hadith from our sixth Imam, which says if two people enter a mosque, one says more prayers and the other one says more supplications, which one is better than the other? Imam replied by saying, both of them are good. The man said, I know both are good, but which one of the two is better so that I should be part of that individual? Imam replied by saying, the one who says more supplications. Have you not heard the statement of Allah, the Exalted, that it says, call upon me and I will answer you? In Surah Ghafir, verse number 60, it says, the Imam said, it is the greatest worship. This dua itself is the greatest of the worship. Among other worship, that Imam is saying that it is the haqq upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you do his worship. Among the worship, and we've been counting the different types of ibadat. So we counted today, gratitude was a form of ibadat. Earning halal is a form of ibadat. And then dua is also considered to be a form of ibadat. Looking at someone can also be considered ibadat. For example, it says in a tradition by Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, looking at a scholar or a just leader and kindly looking at one's parents are considered to be various forms of worshipping of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also looking at a brother in faith who is loved for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a form of ibadat. So we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us all of these opportunities to perform ibadat. That's why I was mentioning earlier that those who are considered to be the elitist of the groups, known as the abrar, these are the people that they do not spare a moment of their life while they're not performing an ibadah or they're outside of ibadah. It is clear that any kind of looking that is done for the sake of God is a form of worshipping, and God will reward for it. Therefore, our fourth Imam, Imam Sajjad, says that it is one of God's rights or incumbent upon us to worship Him. It implies any various forms of worshipping that we mentioned. Over here, I would just want to take a moment to talk about, obviously, among the dates that have been mentioned for the shahadat of our sixth Imam is 15th of Shawwal, when we commemorated the shahadat of our sixth Imam. One other date is also on the 2nd of Shawwal. Another authentic or another date which has been mentioned is 25th of Shawwal, which was yesterday. So let's just talk very towards the end, couple of minutes, of the masayib of our sixth Imam, that when it came to ibadah, Imam says, La tukrihu ila anfusikum ibadah. He said, do not force yourself to worship God when you are tired or unwilling to do so. We see that Imam had numerous amounts of ahadith in this regard. One of the most famous ahadith that Imam mentions, as far as his last time, or Imam's time when he was about to die or was about to leave this world. One of the things that Imam mentions, and which is also in reference to salat, and Hamida, who's the wife of Imam, quotes it, and also our seventh Imam quotes the same hadith. He says, at the last moment of Imam's life, when his soul was about to be taken away, Imam gathered all of his family members, gathered all of his relatives, and he said, I want to give a wasiyat to you. And this was the wasiyat that Imam left the world with. He said, La concerned when we perform the salat. Towards the end, let's remember the musibat of our Imam. That the way this Imam left this world. We see that the mazlumiyat of this Imam, and I heard one of the scholars mention this. He says, when we talk about our third Imam, Imam Husayn, the musibat that he said, when you're going for the ziyarat of Imam, when you enter Karbala, you're thinking about the musibat, the whole event comes into your mind, your heart is filled with sorrow, but as soon as you enter the zari, into the haram of Imam, you feel this serenity, this itminan qalb, you feel this joy once you hold on to Imam. All of that sorrow goes away. He said, but unfortunately, when you go to visit the sixth Imam in Jannatul Baqi, when you go with the intention, with the mindset, thinking about the mazlumiyat of the sixth Imam, but when you enter into the land of Baqi and you see his grave is still without any, shrine on top of it, without properly built, your sorrow increases and doubles as far as that is concerned. He said, once I was doing the ziyarat of Imam, and I wanted to pick up some of the sand from the grave of Imam so that I could bring it back and use it when I died to be placed into my coffin. He said, I heard an Iranian alim, a scholar over there, he said, do not go ahead and do the Imam, but do not pick up the sand from the grave of Imam. And as to why this alim is telling us to abstain from the khak of the grave of Imam. Next made it all clear when he said to us that this is all that is left for the grave of Imam. There is no qubba on top. There is no on top of the grave of Imam. The only thing which is left is the sand. So let the sand be on the grave of Imam and do not pick it up. La akhir da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Let us ask Allah to give us the tawfiq to be able to follow the teachings of Ma'asumeen alayhi salatu wasalam. O Allah, hasten the zuhur of our weighted Imam and make us among the helpers and the soldiers of Imam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alayhi.